Hey guys, it's Dialogue Options, another week, another conversation that elevates the conversation surround gaming and topics of interest to gamers. Today I'm here with Ashe, let me do that again. Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. Hey YouTube viewers, Liana here. It's another week, it's another Dialogue Options, elevating the conversation surrounding games with gamers. I'm joined today by Ashe Schow, a columnist for the Washington Examiner. Ashe, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Now, right off the bat, you are a gamer, so I have to ask you, what games do you love?
I have a huge range. I mean, my favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VII, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's like a junior, it's your first time RPG, but it's still, I love it more than anything. But I play everything from RPGs to, Grand Theft Auto type games, and then The Sims and everything in between. So I'm all over the place.
That's an odd nerd check that Final Fantasy VII is a beginner's RPG. That game is crazy long.
Right. I get that, and I get people just basically being like, oh, well, this one was better, this one, that's just like the popular, it's like they're gaming hipsters or something, where they're like, oh, well, it's just a popular game. And I'm just like, it's popular because it was amazing, and it's like, I'm so excited for the remake. I mean, that was like, my brother told me to turn into the Sony E3 announcement, and then my first words back to him was like, I told you it was going to be this year, because it made sense. Because 2017 is a 20-year anniversary, and 2 to 3 years to make it, and they didn't announce it last year, so this would be the year.
That's the cool thing about Sony as a brand, is you do get that excitement for, the roar in the building when they announced Shenmue was, it shook the place.
For that one too.
Yeah, it shook the place. And you could tell the people who didn't know what it was because they were so confused. And I had to lean over and explain to something like, no, this is Shenmue. This is why it matters. We actually get to finish the story.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things about the Sony brand. Are you a Sony person, or are you sort of all over the place? Do you have a system you prefer?
I'm all over the place. Recently, I don't even have like one of the current generations, because I've basically been playing on my iPad or the computer. So normally, I have an Xbox 360 and a Wii, so my next system is going to be the PS4 for Final Fantasy 15 and 7 Remake. And I don't know, I'm thinking I need to get the new Fallout, because sadly I've not played the Fallout games, despite knowing that they're awesome, seeing that they look awesome. I just haven't gotten around to buying any, so gotta definitely do that.
See, I would say play New Vegas. You don't need to play 3, because I think 4 is going to recycle a lot of the concepts from 3 based on what I've seen. And that sort of thing I'm cautious about. It's, oh, here's demolished Americana again. But as somebody who is, I'm assuming you're American, working in Washington, is that sort of an American thing, seeing your monuments destroyed, that us in, Canada land can't quite relate to?
Well, I think it's part of that. It's also just, here's places that everybody is really, they recognize, and to play through them. And people, especially now, people love watching zombie movies, and it's usually, New York City. So it's just neat to one playthrough, so that all of the times, and I've obviously Resident Evil did this before, but all the times where you're sitting with your friends, be like, no, you don't do that. You don't go to that warehouse. You do this, you do, where you plan out the zombie apocalypse. I mean, me and my friends did years ago, but, so you actually get to go through and play all those things. And it's fun to not only see landmarks that you recognize, but also Vegas. I mean, unless you've been to Vegas and really, really know it, there was a lot to actually discover. Be like, oh, that was a real place too, or oh, that actually existed, and oh, they did that really well. So there's a kind of an exploring element, which is why I want to play the game, because that's something that I really love, which is, I loved Shenmue because you got to explore. I mean, I love open world. You got to explore everything while following the story, which is what I really love in a game.
Now that's interesting because open world has become the new dirty word. Before it was shooter, now it's open world just because there's so many games. But, like you said about Final Fantasy VII, there's a lot of them because they're popular. So
Hmm.
for somebody who is an open world aficionado, what do you love about that particular type of gameplay?
The freedom, like you especially when there's like side quests, or even if there's really not. I mean, you saw it with Skyrim, where people would just kind of like go live as an NPC for a day, and just like follow around, like have your own little job and family or whatever. I mean, I like doing that where there's a story, but some days, maybe I don't want to do like a dungeon or, an actual bit of the storyline. I want to go run around and do absolutely nothing of value. I mean, so much of I've spent an inordinate amount of time in Final Fantasy VII just flying around the world map, like going like this with the high wind, like just for no reason, because it was like, I got nothing to do, but I'm playing this game and I'm just gonna fly around for a while. So I like the freedom to just do whatever I want.
So are you somebody who likes to get into a game and spend a ridiculous amount of time, like 100 plus hours in it?
Yeah, I usually can only play one game at a time because I have to either finish it or get to a point where continuing, there's games that are kind of open-ended. Like I do like the Harvest Moon series,
Oh,
and usually by the time that I like get married and like have a kid in that game, I'm like, man, I don't need to play anymore. There's nothing left to accomplish. So that's usually when I stop them. But most games, there's actually an ending.
yeah. Now that's how I feel about The Sims. So as a player of The Sims, explain to me why The Sims is awesome.
Because you can always just create new stories where, here I've got these characters, and until a new expansion pack comes out, there's nothing I can do with them because they're my main family that does absolutely everything. So when a new expansion pack comes out, all right, I'll play them again and go through everything with them because they're already accomplished. But in the meantime, you get a story idea where I want to create new characters and I want them to do this job or do this. So you just create a whole new story.
Now, I've never actually talked to somebody before who is a fan of The Sims and Grand Theft Auto. So let's shift over to Grand Theft Auto because Grand Theft Auto is more. I'm a Saints Row fan. That's more my kind of game. Okay, I kind of understand Grand Theft Auto more than The Sims. But what do you do when you play GTA? Because that's got a lot of. I mean, 5 has a lot of player freedom as well.
Well, that's what I started playing at Vice City when it was, really became open world. So sometimes, Vice City, I devoted so much time to the real estate business and buying the different properties and, doing all of that stuff. And then, for doing the dates or San Andreas, where you can get your character fat or not or whatever. And 5, of course, just exploring the massive world, massive, beautiful world and discovering so many things. There's like that little murder story. I don't know if you've heard that one, where you go out to a certain rock and there's like blood and a ghost appears. And if you go to a certain website, like little things like that that are put in the game, I love finding. So yeah, there's always something to do. And I do play the storyline to an extent, but I spend so much more time just exploring.
Now, that game is a lightning rod, obviously, for people who like to criticize video games, that game series, I should say. It seems to be one of those things that outsiders, people who don't game, like to seize on because of the overall content. Do you have any sort of thoughts about that as somebody who does work in the media, in the mainstream media?
Well, this is all about narrative, and you want to find something to blame, right, for whatever tragedy happens. So you find out, oh, they played video games for hours a day. Oh, it was the video games. And it's like, no, maybe that person was drawn to video games because they already had violent tendencies and were a loner. And that's not to say that that's what brings all gamers in, obviously, which is why, correlation versus causation type situation. They just want it to be black and white, even though I've seen no evidence that suggests that leads to more violence or makes people more violent, because you're not going to, like, I'm not going to sit down and play that game. I'm not more violent now since I've been playing video games my whole life. Like, I wouldn't be a less violent person because I'm not a violent person anyway. So, I mean, I've never met anyone who played video games who is also violent in any way. I mean, again, I just go back to causation, correlation, causation. Like, are violent people drawn to violent games, or do violent games make people violent? And there's no evidence to suggest the latter.
Yeah, well, there's some evidence that there is no correlation. Like, they can't find it. After 10
Right.
years, they can't find it. And I mean, they have found that there's a temporary increase in aggression, but I was speaking to a past guest, Kite Tails, and she said she gets that from like Splatoon, and that's technically a non-violent game. So
Right.
obviously that sort of mirroring concept isn't there. But what about the type of people in Grand Theft Auto? I mean, Grand Theft Auto 5, I just found the characters so whiny, and I couldn't relate to any of them. And that was my personal thing. I mean, I know people feel that way about Assassin's Creed and other games like that. That whole emo thing is very subjective. But how did you find the characters in 5?
Well, I found them interesting, but not lovable. I mean, Trevor, to an extent, is very, very funny. But as far as like having one of the three that I'm actually like, oh yeah, I love that. You know, like you have some games and it's the characters that you love. Like you love the story, but you become attached to the actual character. Hasn't been like that for me with any of the Grand Theft Autos. I mean, I've liked the story, not the characters. And the opposite is true for, the Final Fantasies, where well, not the total opposite, because I love the stories too, but I love the characters. So, yeah, I don't know.
I forgot to ask you about Final Fantasy. What do you think about the whole Tifa Lockhart redesign situation?
Are they actually redesigning her, or just people arguing?
I'm not sure yet. I don't think anybody will be really sure until the game comes out, but there's definitely been a lot of speculation.
Right, and I actually have an article coming out in the Federalist soon, they said, that addresses some of the social justice warrior points about Final Fantasy VII, and I do get into that because it angers me that these people who claim to be saying we shouldn't be focusing on the way a woman looks really focus on the way women look. I mean, Tifa is my absolute favorite fictional character in anything, any medium, movies, TV, video games, anywhere. She's my absolute favorite. And so to reduce her to nothing but her boobs is actually really like it really makes me mad, because she is such a deep character. Like, she is such an important character to that game, and nowhere in that does anybody sit around talking about her boobs. Like, that doesn't even come up in the game. So yeah, she has them, but nobody in the game focuses on it. The closest ever is when Rude and Reno are talking about which one of the good guys that they like, and Rude says he likes Tifa, but he doesn't go into any detail. Like, there's nothing anywhere in this about a character's looks. So it irritates me that there's these people that can only focus on that, and not the fact that she is known to be a strong character. In fact, there's one or two times where she does break down in the game, and Barrett is there to be like, this isn't you. Why are you getting all emotional all of a sudden? This isn't you at all. So, I mean, she's not just some, just there for her boobs. Like, she is incredibly important to the game. I mean, probably I would say the most important character aside from Aerith, honestly, because if it weren't for Aerith, the world wouldn't be saved, and if it weren't for Tifa, Sephiroth wouldn't be dead, because she was the one that had to wake up Cloud in the live stream. Otherwise, he'd still be drooling on himself in a wheelchair.
Yeah. I mean, the Final Fantasy games have physical symbolism. This is something about Japanese games that I think is little understood. I'm a Soul Calibur fan, so I come at it from that franchise, but it's the same thing. I mean, Lulu, I believe, from Final Fantasy, I always get it wrong because 9 and 10 blur together. Yeah.
10 and 10 too.
For some odd reason, 9 and 10 blur together in my mind. I don't know why. But she's got a very similar physicality to Tifa. They're both maternal characters with maternal elements. And so their physicality reflects that slightly more maturing female character as opposed to the more childlike characters that they make appear childlike. And to
Right.
me, that's what they were doing with Tifa's physicality. It had nothing to do with make her sexy, because let's face it, her clothes are not exactly an evening, a club gown. It's
Right.
shorts and a t-shirt and overall and like suspenders. Um, but that's what I got from the design of those characters. And I find it very strange that it's even become a thing, because in a game like Final Fantasy, especially back then, where the graphics were improving significantly, but they weren't obviously where the franchise is now, which is, just glorious eye candy, game after game after game.
Hmm.
I thought it was a way of making the female characters look different beyond, palette swap, different hair, different hair color, different eye color. Um, do you think some of that's been forgotten as gaming has become more mainstream?
Well, I actually had never seen it as, I mean, I guess I should have. I know about, like, what's in a name, what does everybody's name mean? I had known that, but I'd actually never thought about the person's looks in these games being designed to elicit, their internal characters. So I actually find that really fascinating, and again, something to keep in mind for critics. So yeah, I mean, that's actually kind of new to me, but I love it.
Well, that's interesting. And you just sort of connected to that element of the character anyway, even though it wasn't conscious. It was sort of an
Right.
emotional response.
Right. Because not only like it's not like every single character in every single Final Fantasy, every female looks that way. I mean,
Mm-mm.
Aerith was a very different proportionally, and you see there's that game especially has a huge shift. There are people that absolutely love Aerith, and there are
Yep.
people who absolutely love Tifa.
Yep.
And, some people who like Tifa like her looks. Some people who like her, like me, they like her personality better than Aerith's personality. But if it were kind of that whole, well, guys just want big boobs, then every guy would be a Tifa fan. So, I
That's a
mean,
good point.
everyone would be Team Tifa. Like, it just doesn't work that way because it doesn't matter. I mean, other Final Fantasy heroines have not been that way. I mean, in Final Fantasy X, Lulu isn't exactly everybody's, like, super favorite character. She's not the main female. I mean, Yuna is
Yeah.
differently proportioned. And, you get that in 9, 8. There haven't really been a whole lot of big boobed characters.
Yeah. They spread them out, and that's why I think it's sort of sad that they get rid of one, because yeah, they are sort of, they're not overdone. Clearly, like you said, not every female character is built that way, and I think that it's odd to me that series that should be rewarded for bothering to build different body types for characters, because that costs money, they're now being sort of spanked down for running the gamut of what women look like. And I guess I could understand it if every woman in the game looked like that. It would be sort of,
Right.
eye rolling. I'd do it, even though I am built more like that than a straight up and down sort of twig. But at the
Right,
same,
same here.
yeah,
That's what irritates me a lot about these is that they assume that no women could possibly ever look like this. Like, I don't know if you saw, I think BuzzFeed ripped it off, but there was that one that was like, if female game characters had more realistic bodies, well, they just kind of made them all chubby.
yeah,
And I was like, I don't look like them. I look like the originals a whole lot more. And that's just this whole kind of thing where if you're thin or, if you're thin but you're not a stick, then you're wrong or
yeah.
you don't exist. And that that you have to be slightly to more overweight in order to be a real woman.
Yeah, I think that's something of a reaction of it, that existence sort of being sidelined, and I think we're getting better in terms of seeing more diverse looking women in the media. But then I have lunch with an actress friend of mine or somebody still out on the audition circuit, and they're still like, well, my boobs are too big to play a lawyer. And I'm like, I didn't realize there was a requirement to be under a certain size to earn a law degree, you know. What's your opinion, though, about media as representation of reality versus media as influencer of reality? I'm interested in getting your views on that.
I think at this point it's more of an influencer as far as, here's the narratives that we decide exist, and they repeat them over and over and over and over again, and people buy them. I mean, you saw with Gamergate
Hmm.
that the narrative of gamers being basement dwelling, misogynistic neckbeards was basically shattered, and the idea of them just sitting around harassing women was definitely shattered. And obviously, that was the media's narrative of Gamergate, not the actual narrative of Gamergate. And you see things like that, and you see that in so many other situations where, you have this whole war on women thing, whereas apparently American women or Western women are now the most oppressed class in the entire world. Like, it's just so dangerous for us to exist, apparently, according to these narratives. And you start to see anybody that pushes back gets so much criticism. But one thing I've also noticed with people in the Gamergate movement is that they're starting to question all kinds of other things they believed, because if the media was lying about this, then maybe Republicans aren't murderous evil people that just want to watch the world burn.
Is that
Um,
happening? There's that shift there? That's very interesting.
there's just been, it's not like a monumental thing, obviously. It's
Hmm.
just, I've just been getting it from some people who have just been reaching out and saying, like, you know what, I'm starting to question this. But there's obviously not like a huge shift because it is still a very much preferred narrative.
Now, are you a Republican?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I'm right leaning,
Okay,
but I guess
that's
more libertarian is
oh,
better.
okay. Because I mean, these divides are hard for me as a Canadian who lives in a three-party system, to sort of understand why a Republican would be inherently evil. And I know we have
Media.
polarization. Yeah, we have
Media narrative.
polarization here too. But I mean, do you feel that way about Democrats? Do you feel like Democrats are inherently evil, or
No.
so do you feel like it's more one-sided, or is it just sort of like everybody's more aware of the side that opposes them?
People are more aware of this side. I mean, obviously, I don't speak for all Republicans because there is a very large group of them that do believe that, Democrats, maybe not evil, but are definitely, you know, um, not up to the good of the people or just want to control people. That's kind of the narrative for the right. But I mean, the media, their narrative is that Republicans are just these awful people. Everything they do is to take away the rights of women or to cause more murder and mayhem or something, or, with gun laws. There's just it's always something. Everything they do is in order to hurt somebody. Like that is the narrative that's playing down here. And I mean, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see people on the right accepting the narrative that the left wants to control people, and it's depressing to see people on the left accept the narrative that people on the right want to hurt people. And kind of going to your question, it's much more prevalent toward Republicans, where if you're on a college campus, they're like colleges across this country, conservatives are afraid to actually say their views because they will be attacked in class by liberal professors. They will be protested. They, get, all kinds of issues on college campuses or anywhere else. It's just, so biased against them that it's difficult for a lot to actually come forward. And even, me, if I meet new people, I either just try to like not say anything or kind of feel them out and maybe try to be friends before you let it out, because you don't want
Wow.
to lead with I'm a Republican, because so often you'll just get shit for it.
Wow. That's interesting to me, because I mean, let's pivot to the university campuses, because you've written quite a bit on issues involving universities. And I mean, obviously, the increased academic focus on video games is affecting games. And I think that some people who either never went to university or went to university, in the mists of the past, like I did I've seen it from the time I was on a campus, and we had, there was a place we all just called the rape tunnel, and we didn't go there. And there were guys, at the time it was guys that were the forefront. Now it seems to be sort of both in the circles I run in, but you knew, don't be left alone with them. Don't do this, don't do that. The pendulum has swung so much now on campuses, and you've been covering that, correct?
Right. Yeah. I about a little more than a year ago, I started covering this, and now it's all I want to cover. It's almost exclusively what I cover is at least the campus sexual assault angle, which is, you're no longer allowed to tell women to avoid that area of campus because that's not the world they want to live in. That was actually a quote from a woman who was not happy with the fingernail polish invention.
Oh, for the drinks.
Right.
Right.
It was like, I don't want to stick my finger in a drink. That's not the world I want to live in. Like, I don't want to have to test my drink. It's like, sure, I don't want to live in that world either, but I do. So I'm going to, I'm going to be careful to protect myself, but you're not allowed to give anyone advice on how not to be a victim because that's seen as victim blaming now. And it's ridiculous because that's dangerous. I mean, yeah, it's not your fault that something happens to you. You always have to protect yourself. That's why, on the metro, on our subway system, they're always saying, don't be standing near a door with your phone. Because someone might run by and take it. And I actually saw that happen. So when I'm on the metro, yeah, I carry my phone out, but I'm always like, I have it right here with me. So whenever the doors open, I'm holding it really tight because I've seen it happen. So, you just do things to protect yourself. And I don't think it's wrong to suggest protecting yourself.
It's funny because one of the things that struck me when I was down at E3 a couple years ago, and a local, was insisting how safe the downtown area is, and then they sort of launched into an amusing anecdote about how they got mugged because I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't, they sort of put it on themselves that they were stupid and therefore they got mugged. And I admit, I didn't feel safe in downtown LA after that. Why is it so different, that experience of, sort of big city life, you have to be street smart, to university campuses, which, as far as I understand, there was a fairly monumental study that came out not long ago that said the quote unquote don't rape message as opposed to don't get raped hasn't worked any better. So are you aware of that study?
That study, no, but I'm aware of the study that found that if you teach women self-defense and how to recognize bad situations and how to get out of them, that they're less likely to later report being sexually assaulted than if you don't teach women any of those things. So I know that study is out there. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, like, if you protect yourself, you have a better chance of not being a victim. And when it comes to sexual assault, that seems to be the one area where you can't tell people to protect themselves. Tell people, to keep your purse by your side when you're walking down a street in the big city. That's perfectly acceptable. But tell a woman not to drink so much? What kind of misogynistic jackass are you? That's the message that's being sent. And it's like, just maybe don't drink so much. I mean, when I was in college, when I first got to college, I had been, blasted by media and movies telling me that fraternities were awful places filled with awful men. Guess where I never went when I was in college? I never once went to a fraternity party. Got invited to some by friends that were going, said, nope, not ever going near one of those. And I never did. And, now you learn, you meet fraternity people and you're like, no, this was, a bad narrative where, there's lots of alcohol flowing, inhibitions are lowered, and things like drunken hookups happen. I also didn't ever get blackout drunk. I've always
Yeah.
been able to remember what I did the night before, because when I start feeling drunk, I stop drinking, which is
Right.
apparently something that just, I knew it didn't happen on college campuses. I knew friends who would black out, or, would just get so drunk that they're throwing up in the bathroom, passing out in the streets. Like, just, I knew that. And I'm like, that's not for me. I'm never going to get that drunk. And I haven't.
Yeah. Now, I mean, are we at the point where we're actually going to have to start street proofing men to attend college? Because one of the things that struck me reading your pieces on these guys that have been falsely accused and not just sue the school and all that stuff, I related it back to gaming and some of the things I'd said to guys who have been falsely accused or got their Twitter accounts banned and all that stuff. And um, what I actually said, and I wonder now if this isn't a form of victim blaming itself, I was like, look, this is the internet equivalent of don't stick your dick in crazy. This is, if you engage certain types of people online, it's not gonna end well. Is this practical, or am I just old and out of touch?
I mean, applying the same social justice standards,
Right.
then you were definitely
That's
victim
victim
blaming those
blaming.
people.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's advice. If you criticize Randy Harper, she's going to get an internet mob and try to harass you. Like, these things are going to happen. If you criticize Anita Sarkeesian, she's going to claim that you're harassing her in some way. These things are going to happen. I mean, my advice would be to just pretend these people don't exist. Like, I wish we could. It's why I don't ever write anything about Amanda Marcotte or Jessica Valenti. I used to. I don't anymore, because I'd rather just pretend they don't exist. That's what they do to us. I mean, that's unless they want to claim that they're being harassed. They never ever mentioned me. Marcotte did once, but it was because I was going after a Republican, so she could. Or she did it twice, but once she was attacking me. But it's like they just pretend I don't exist. So fine, I'll pretend you don't exist.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it seems like we're getting the same thing in gaming that we're getting on campuses, this idea of this isn't the world I want to live in. I don't want there to be some people I can criticize and some people I can't criticize. So there seems to be, to me, they're so similar. There seems to be a common source somewhere for this thinking that we should have no common sense limits on our behavior. What do you think, as a gamer and then somebody who has investigated this campus situation, what do you think's going on here?
well, I think we both know that it's the current strain of campus feminism
Mm-hmm.
and millennial feminism. It's not first wave. It's not second wave.
It's not even third, really.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not even third wave. It's just this new idea that women as victims, whereas, in the 90s, crime peaked and it's been falling ever since. So how do you start justifying gender studies programs if women aren't victims of something anymore? Well, then you turn them into victims. So everything makes them a victim. Of course, unless you're a pro Gamergate female or a conservative female, then of course you don't matter. You're the wrong kind of woman. You're awful and you're the problem. You're a puppet of the patriarchy or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it just seems that the themes are common, where there's these women that just seem to really want to be seen as victims and want that sympathy. I mean, I don't know if it's some new form of Munchausen's where, it's not I fake a physical, some sort of
Mm-hmm.
illness in order to get attention. It's I fake victimhood in order to get
Mm-hmm.
attention, or I extremely exaggerate my victimhood in order to get attention. I mean, it just seems to be something like that at this point. I mean, George Will had written about it last year that if you come out and say, hey, I'm a victim, then you get trotted all over the media, you get so much sympathy and support. Nothing you do can ever be wrong. I mean, it takes something like, Emma Sulkowicz, how she made the porno of her alleged rape to kind
Mm-hmm.
of actually get people to be like, no, that was wrong. But other than that, I mean, there's just nothing you can say or do that's wrong. You're completely elevated and protected. I mean, you even see Rolling Stone's Jackie, right? She's not being charged with anything. She's not being disciplined by her school in any way. And the people just who rushed to her defense saying, oh my God, this victim, and we need to do these draconian laws, are still the Jessica Valenti's and Amanda Marcotts of the world are saying, well, something obviously happened to this woman to make her do this, because it couldn't possibly be that she was so upset that a guy didn't like her that she would make something up, because that never, ever happens.
Well, I mean, the statistics are, and I don't want to get too far away from gaming, but the statistics are that very few women actually do lie about that stuff. Most women are telling the truth. Now, to be fair, most men don't rape either. So we're dealing with two minorities in situations. It seems to be taking over the dialogue.
Well, we're not dealing with most women tell the truth, because you might have a statistic that says 2% of rapes are false. And there's the American study, because most of those statistics are taken from studies outside of the U.S. or from decades ago. But
see, I had heard 8. The number
right,
I had heard was 8%.
There's that one, which I'm getting to. A recent one that was actually done in America said that it was like 7 to 8, and that 7 to 8 are provably false, as in she recanted, or the story of the woman who was wearing the Fitbit, and it was like it was tracking her movements, so clearly like it didn't happen. So it's something like that. There's another 8 or so percent that are just unfounded, as in you like the report wasn't, it was like the report was of sexual assault in order to report a different crime, like a robbery or something. It was weird. It was weird. I do have an article out there about it.
So we're up to 16% now.
Right, about 15, 16%. Then there's another like 20% that are, I think there was 2 statistics that were like 20, 25%. And it was basically that whole gray area where it might be true, might not be true. There's no evidence one way or to push it one way or the other, right? So now you're up to, what are we up to now?
We're up to about 30. 60. Yeah, we're in the 30s. We're in the high 30s.
Right. So there was another 20% that was, again, it was a kind of an unfounded thing, and you're starting to get up there, and then you're getting to, the 20% that go to trial or whatever, but of those, small percentage result in an actual conviction.
Yeah, only now about 3% result in a conviction.
Now you can say that means only 3% of those are true. You mean the arrests don't have enough evidence, or whatever you want to say. But it also says that if there's only 7 or 8% that are provably false, there's only a few percent that are provably true as well. Whereas if you say 7, 8% are false, doesn't actually make 92, 93 true.
That's true. There's a massive gray, and your statistics are spot on. There's a massive gray area. We have to say we just don't know. I mean, to me, this does loop back into video games when we get into this idea of harassment and whether it's criminal or whether the cops should be involved. The reality is that a lot of things very terrible happen that, some studies would lump into sexual assault. Like, according to these studies, I have been a victim of sexual assault multiple times.
Oh, of course, me too.
My ass grabbed, forced kissing, everything like that. That's all happened, at nerd conventions. But I'm not going to go report that as rape. That was a shitty thing that happened. And I just wish in a perfect world I'd be able to haul off and smack the guy without getting charged with assault. That's the part that pisses me off, Right. But we do have this massive community gulf where I find where people are like, well, unless the cops are involved, I don't give a shit. And I think we're getting that sort of mirrored phenomenon again, where I think that's a big failing in gaming, that somebody had a shitty experience. That doesn't mean you don't care because it doesn't meet the burden of criminality, So I think we're in a situation on sort of both beats here. We know it doesn't work. We know that the things we have tried in the past and the things that are being tried now, basically creating a reverse onus system similar to the war on drugs, that a guy has to prove he didn't rape a woman as opposed to somebody having to prove that he did. That obviously isn't, it's not practical. It's going to fall apart eventually because you're going to get these mounting lawsuits. So what do we do in these cases where it's a bad thing, but it's not a criminal thing?
Well, I mean, I think in that situation, you either, buck up and move on, depending on how bad it is. Obviously, we've all been with guys who didn't actually care about us, and we've been with guys who we didn't care about. So, I mean, jerkish behavior, I mean, I guess you just, let people know they're jerks. It's like they're not criminal for it. And some of these guys aren't even jerkish. I mean, some of these guys were like, they texted the girl the next morning because they wanted to get breakfast or they wanted to actually spend time with her. And then they get accused. And it's like, what? And that's not to say that, oh, well, all a rapist has to do is text the next morning and then it couldn't possibly be rape. That's like,
that's easy
obviously
way to cover it up. Yeah.
Right. That's not the way, but it's just like you're seeing these guys who like sincerely were like, I thought we had a connection. Like we met at a party, yeah, but she seemed really into me. I was into her, and then you get accused of something. So, I mean, I think jerkish behavior of all kinds, whether you're treating someone poorly in a relationship, not criminally, but just as an asshole, or whether you're falsely claiming somebody did something to you. I mean, I think that behavior, I mean, I don't think that there should be any kind of college punishment for it, but, maybe just tell your friends, call someone else like, oh, he's a jackass. I mean, I've had friends who've dated guys and then that guy hit on me and they're like, no, this is what he did. And then it's like, yeah, well, then I don't trust the guy.
Right. I mean, nowadays online, that could be considered defamation if someone finds it and makes it public. Like that's the difficulty, is you can't warn somebody off of a person anymore without risking a lawsuit yourself. I've had that situation where I see some people getting into, business with somebody or befriending somebody who I know is bad news, but I'm advised to say nothing because of a non-disclosure agreement or because of, a potential defamation suit. And that sits really wrong with me, because I would rather a bad thing that happened to me be something I could use to prevent it to happen to somebody else. I'm that kind of person.
Exactly. We've now created a society where instead of, the people just, something bad happens to you, you tell me about it, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll avoid that guy, or, I'm definitely not going to help him if he ever comes to me for help. But yeah, it's just this lawsuit threatening. I mean, you see it, these ridiculous lawsuits thrown around just to silence people.
Yeah.
Or you see it on Twitter. There's a small group of people, they're extreme right-wingers who, threaten lawsuits whenever somebody criticizes them.
Yeah, I've
criticized them on Twitter. And one of them, Chuck Johnson, actually is trying to sue Gawker for something. There's actually a website dedicated to how many hours had gone by since Chuck Johnson threatened to sue somebody on Twitter. And he's not on Twitter anymore, so he can't do it. But there was actually a countdown clock because it wouldn't be more than a few days before he would threaten to sue people. So, you kind of have that situation going on, and it does kind of like create a little bit of fear, because it's like, do I want to go out and tell someone when I know that there's this very, very bad person? And luckily in my situation, everybody knows this person is terrible.
Right.
And I'm not the only one that knows they're dangerous, so I don't even have to do anything. It's already known. But, if I was the only one that knew it, I wouldn't be able to warn people because of the threat. And granted, they would have to be able to afford a lawyer.
Yeah.
and a lawyer that is just so, stereotypical lawyerly to accept something so
Sure.
trivial. So, I mean, that's one thing that I would advise people is to just not be so afraid because lawyers aren't cheap.
Yeah.
The cheap lawyers aren't cheap, and you know, sometimes trivial lawsuits aren't, they aren't as easy as they look.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've kind of observed, especially in gaming, is all these things we claim, it being about race, it being about gender, it being about, gender identity, sexual orientation, it really comes down to class. And I mean, I think that's part of it is people are scared. This whole punching up concept, it seems so ridiculous to me because if you're punching up, then that means they're more likely to sue you. And it just seems, I don't know how, part of the reason we started doing this series is I felt I needed to do something to get people talking instead of getting people screaming at each other, and it's not that hard. I mean, we're two women, we're different political stripes, we're in different countries, so there's almost no comparison between our version of liberalism up here. Our Liberal Party is the centrist party. It's bizarre. And, your two-party system down in the US, but we're having a very productive conversation and we've never spoken before. So why aren't more people doing this, do you think? Like, is it a money thing? Is it a affiliation thing? Is it political? Like, what's stopping the dialogue?
It's an anonymity thing, I think,
Okay.
with the internet. I mean, so much of it, the hostility comes from not actually speaking face to face. Whereas there might come a week from now where I say something on the internet and you take it in a way that I didn't intend it because, you don't have the good sarcasm font
Right,
has
right.
not been created yet. Or,
Or we've got that, what is it, the /S or something
right,
like that? Yeah.
right. Or, I didn't have a room to put that.
Yeah.
Or,
You thought it was
sometimes,
so obvious that you didn't
right,
need to, right?
right. And it's just like whatever, because it might not even like be anything like that. I mean, like you might say something and I was just having a bad day and took it the wrong way, So something like that might happen in a couple weeks. And on the internet, it might escalate much differently than if something like that were to happen right here face to face because we can actually get the tone and see each other and see that you're not sitting behind your computer laughing maniacally like what a horrible, awful person, which is lost a lot on internet anonymity.
That's interesting because I mean, some people are like, I need anonymity. I need it to be safe. I can't take these people on. I'm a little person. If I'm not anonymous, they can get to me. They can get me fired. That we're back in that. This isn't the world I want to live in territory.
Right.
I mean, I have never embraced anonymity. I've been a huge proponent of persistent online identity because at this point, I've been called pretty much everything it's possible to call someone. And it just eventually all sort of turns into this haze,
Right.
that there's so much data on a person that a narrative becomes quite complicated and flexible, and it's harder to sort of pigeonhole you as this brand that we like to make so many people into.
Right.
Now,
Well, I
go
also
ahead.
want to point out when I say anonymity, I don't even mean like me using a fake name. I just literally mean we're not talking face to face or in a room together, which is the example of like if me and you have I don't want to say that it's all people who go anonymously are a problem because
Right.
there are legitimate reasons to do that. Or a lot of it, I mean, really is branding. I mean, when you see with people like the Ralph Retort or Popat, who, what, they started with a name like that and it's just a brand. So yeah, there's different types of anonymity.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you've done getting into the whole, because you brought up Gamergate, the whole ethics in game journalism, and you got a major win out of the Society of Professional Journalists conference. You probably had the moment of the conference that, you kept pushing. They were batting it away at first. Yeah, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then you finally got them to admit that, a lack of disclosure that they're writing about someone's roommate. Yeah, that's a problem. They shouldn't have done that. Um, I thought that was a big breakthrough because it was sort of a fundamental thing of, yeah, we've talked about this, we've looked at it, but none of that's binding in journalism, and that's what's really difficult because, just today I'm looking on Twitter and there's other journalists calling out a young reporter, she happens to be female, for an unpopular story. Now, to me, this is completely antithetical to what we're supposed to be doing. We're all supposed to be asking these questions. We're all sort of being theoretically in support of an unpopular view, provided it's properly sourced. But I think that's naive at this point. I think media's evolved, and as somebody who's primarily an opinion columnist, I wanted to sort of make this the last sort of topic we talked about today. So what is your job that you call it as an opinion writer that does things based on news? And there's a cat. Yay!
Yeah, I'm surprised it took him this long.
Hi, kitty.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at this point there is no unopinionated journalism, because you either show your opinion by leaving information out of a story, or you cover it a certain way. So even people that are claiming to be straight news, they're not straight news. So I honestly think that almost everything should go under opinion at this point, because everything is basically opinionated journalism at this point. Nobody really hides their bias. And, that was one of the things that, I don't usually call myself a journalist, just because even though I do, follow, the standard ethics, I am able to let my bias show. I think everybody should just do that, and then you can question their story however you want. I mean, we're already doing that, but so many people are hiding behind this idea that, oh no, I'm a journalist, you can't question me, I'm doing the right thing, when it's like, no. I mean, Gamergate really exposed this in games journalism, and I think games journalism was probably the worst element, because it seemed like there was no even idea of a code of ethics. But these things go on in real journalism as well.
Oh, for sure. I've seen stuff where people got completely railroaded, lost their jobs, wrote to the ombudsman. They didn't do anything. There's so many loopholes in terms of what you can do when you're showing a story. You don't have to show both sides. If it's not, I mean, they use I think it's an excuse, but they call it, well, it's not the main part of the story, it was an aside, so we didn't have to show both sides. Well, that's a great way for people who don't just have a bias, they're actually operators to poison the well in terms of best practices and in terms of facts. And it seems like we're getting this slippery slope where we're losing facts and we're losing, long-term, more importantly, truth. And I'm just wondering if there's a way, other than really sort of educating people on the media and how it works, if there's any way to sort of get back to facts with opinion instead of opinion with an agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gamergate has kind of, for the most part, found the answer, which is, I don't want to call it name and shaming, because it sounds worse than it is, but because letters to the editor, because newspapers are dying, letters to the editor generally aren't much of a thing, at least for like the big agencies. They don't usually get a lot of attention, but now there's Twitter, right? So you have the social media, so you make sure that that everybody knows it, and striking the right balance of not being like, how dare you, and being angry, but actually trying to have a very civilized conversation and saying, hey, this isn't right. Here's who you should talk to about it. Here are the facts, and doing it as, politely, needs to be definitely, I think the way to go, at least for now, until somebody smarter than me thinks of a better way. But, I just politely pointing it out. I remember Gamergate had the lot of success with Gawker's sponsors, or advertisers, Whereas like, hey, do you really want to keep working with a website that just does these horrible things to people? Um, I mean that's another route. It's not usually a route I would go, but I could see there being a need for that. And especially with a place like Gawker that doesn't seem to want to change or be good in any way. But, you know, in general, and I'm not good at this. Let me just not say that I do this perfectly.
Okay.
I'm a rah, how dare you? Oh yeah, look at you and your narrative type person.
So this is sort of a destination that you're on a journey to, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to be nicer, and I've seen a lot of people in Kotaku in action are very good at this. I mean, just today there was a Gamergate story out, and the person went to Kotaku after the story was published to get more information, and so many of the top answers were people that were like, "Hey, I mean, wish you had done this before, but you're doing it now. Thanks. Here's all the information you need." And we need people like that, you know, to be there. And then there's me who's just kind of angry about things. So I think that the people that can be more civilized than I should be speaking out.
It's interesting, though, because, I mean, obviously the mainstream narrative is that Gamergate, the wording is so particular. It's an offshoot of the culture war that heavily features harassment of women. And this is an element that I'm sure you share my frustration. And I have issues with this narrative for a very unique reason, because I was an early Gamergate target in September. A series of unfortunate events led a one-off piece in Polygon to be published by me. It was on mental illness and gaming and mentally ill heroes. And that, to many people, was proof of some sort. I was a shill, or I was a plant. I was trying to undermine. I got bombarded for 3 days, 500 tweets an hour, death threats, rape threats, all the bad stuff. But Ben Kuchera, who edited the piece, was right there too, and he was getting pummeled right alongside me. So it's not, yes, I'm a woman, but I'm also a reporter. Or an opinion columnist, more accurately. But here I was, we were both getting hit. And all people wanted to focus on was that Gamergate was attacking a woman. That pissed me off. Because for the purposes of that, were some of the tactics gendered? Yes, but I don't think that the intent was misogynistic. I think the intent was get the journalist, not get the bitch. You know,
right.
And that's a very difficult thing to explain. They look at me like I've gone crazy, you know, like I could have played the victim card and I didn't. And I've had people actually get angry at me for not recognizing that I am this horrible victim of the patriarchy through video games. Why do you think there is this investment in getting the story wrong here? It's baffling to me. It doesn't make any sense. I think Gamergate made so many mistakes in the early days. There's plenty to hang on them. There's plenty they legitimately did wrong. We don't need to add more.
Right. Well, again, it goes back to that narrative. It's an easy narrative, right?
Okay.
Because you need, right now in journalism, there is the need to be first, to get something up right away. And so you cling to these easy narratives because you don't have to check them, because they're just accepted fact that Gamergate is a harassment campaign. So anytime anything happens on the web, pin it on Gamergate. It's probably them because they're such terrible people. I mean, that's just how it kind of works. So whenever they see a woman, rather than having to do a little bit of research to, you know, see that Ben was also getting it, they notice woman, narrative, woman attacked on the internet. Boom, done, print. Yeah. That's how it happens. I mean, that's, you know, you don't have to go to Google the least bit, because you're certain in your narrative. I mean, that's, you know, Richard Bradley is the one who got the ball rolling on bringing down the Rolling Stone story, and it was because he questioned the narrative, because he had been burned before by Stephen Glass at the New Republic. So he knew to do that. He knew that if there's a story that confirms all of your biases, you better check it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure,
in
yeah.
media now, if it confirms all your biases, well, it must be true. Just go ahead with it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it comes from.
That's very true. I do that in my own head because, I mean, obviously, as part of my community organization duties, we did get complaints that, it was often, we did get a few where a woman was harassing a man, and we had men coming to us saying, please don't let her in, and here's why. Because up here, I don't know if it's down there, when it's a private event, you reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. So if you're running an event, especially if there's alcohol, the responsibility and the decision is entirely on the event owner to make that decision. And I'm liable if I let somebody in I shouldn't have. But most of the time it was women accusing men. Some, like you said, completely fell apart. Others had merit. They were warranted. One guy was so brazen, he did it to me, so I didn't even have to do an investigation. It's like, yeah, that thing somebody came towards, it happened to me. You did it to me in the elevator,
right?
Kind of thing. But it wasn't all the time. It was, we had one or two a year, and I'm glad that people came forward. But at the same time, my thought process was always, okay, my bias is in favor of the complainant. So did I lose you?
For like a second there.
Okay, yeah.
The last.
Yeah, there was a blip on the line. I'll pick it up for editing. So I was aware my bias is in favor of the complainant, and I know this every single time. Did I lose you?
No, I still hear you. It's
okay,
just
I'm getting, let's let this pass. Oh my God, we're almost at the end and this happened. There we go. It was just a line sharing bandwidth issue. Okay. So I know my bias is in favor of the complainant every single time. Because I'm aware of that, I can make sure that even though I go into it with a bias, I err based on that bias and make sure that the other person gets a fair shake. That doesn't seem that difficult to me.
No, it really isn't. When I'm hearing these stories, and I was burned by Rolling Stone in the beginning because I thought it's in Rolling Stone. I mean, granted, yeah, they're
an award-winning publication.
Right. I thought, yeah. All right, my first article on it says, like, hey, sometimes these things really do happen, and this is what we need to do about it. So, I mean, I got taken in as well. And then my second read through of the story, I was like, wait, none of this stuff makes sense, but I didn't want to question it because it doesn't make sense, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen, and I don't have any proof that it didn't happen.
Right.
Luckily, there was Richard Bradley to be like, hey, here's some issues, and then the Washington Post was trying to report it themselves, and they discovered everything, right? So me just sitting out there saying, nope, think this is not true, is going to mean nothing, and I'm, going to look like someone who does not believe anybody. And what happens for me is I'm not always, it depends on the story of whose side I believe. I've come to believe that so many people who seek the attention of the media and claim these horribly brutal stories are usually lying, or at the very least,
there's a higher probability. Yeah, we can agree that people who seek out the press are more likely to have motives that aren't just, I want justice. We can agree with that. We're going to get in trouble if we say all the time, or if we assign a value to it, because all the statistics people are going to dissent. But yeah, I can agree with you. There is a heightened risk of that.
But even the stories of the sides, the lawsuits that I'm sent from the accused student, when I read through them and I end up interviewing these kids, I go in there with all these questions of their story, as if, as if they might not be telling the truth, right? Because the last thing I want to do is defend a rapist, right?
Of course,
so
yeah.
I want to
never want to be wrong there.
Right, so I read through the lawsuits, and I'm like, okay, well, you say this here, but then you say this here. I'm not sure, this doesn't make sense to me, or you just kind of say this happened, but like, how did you know this happened? So I ask those questions to make sure, because, you learn that, all right, the accuser's story doesn't seem right, but you got to make sure that the accused story is right. So,
Yeah.
you include everything and you just want to make sure.
So it basically comes down to what all decisions of this sort do is credibility.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, it seems like we're both sort of, it's funny because you're coming at it from sort of a right-wing libertarian perspective. I'm coming at it from, I consider myself a left-wing libertarian, which is odd. So maybe the agreement is coming through the libertarian part of that
Yeah.
equation. But we seem to have come to very similar conclusions from different sides of the fence. And for me, it seems like the issue is something has gone terribly wrong in terms of the perception privileged women have of the world around them. And this is not discounting the serious issues that we have in, say, affecting African American women, or up here, the missing and murdered Aboriginal women, or women who end up in extreme religious sects. Up here we have something called Lev Tahor, where they apparently weren't educating girls and forcing them to wear burqa-like garments. We're removing those, obviously. I mean, I think we can both agree these things are real. These things still happen. They need work, and they're not the focus right now. And I mean, women's issues are obviously, from that intersectional perspective, still very important. But that's not what we're dealing with in terms of these issues we've identified that happen in both gaming and then in your beat on university campuses. So how do we make women less afraid of the world?
I think it has to come from within, right? So both you and
Hang on a second, we're getting a
I
connection
mean,
issue.
who taught us this? I mean, my parents definitely, I would say,
Hang on, Ash. Sorry,
were
can you
always,
start?
everything is my fault.
Uh,
If something bad,
Hang on. Can you start from the beginning of that question? It got all garbled.
okay,
So do you want me to throw it to you again?
yes.
Okay. How, based on all this, how do we stop women from being afraid of the world?
I think it has to come from within each woman on her own. I mean, people like you and I can put out there and say, "Hey, the world isn't as terrible as some other women would have you believe, and that you can take control of your own life and you can feel empowered that way rather than having to rely on other people." But I think a lot of it has to come from within. I mean, how we look at, how did you and I come to this idea that maybe some bad things have happened to you on the internet, or at conventions, but are you gonna go cry in a corner about it, or raise money to help your victimhood because you now have PTSD about it? No. I mean, for me personally, a lot of this personal responsibility kind of thing came from my parents, who always made sure that I found how I could do better next time whenever something bad happened to me. I don't want to say that they made me always think it was my fault, but it was definitely like, you know, what can you do next time to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And I think that did really help. It was definitely instilled in me this idea of like, well, I'm not going to put myself in bad situations because I know that, my parents will be there for me if it's
Yeah,
something bad happens,
that's a
but
huge
it's
thing.
also, why did you do that? So, and I don't think that's victim blaming. I mean, sometimes it was really annoying to me to be like, no, come on, I need your help. This happened to me. But it's
Right.
like, you waited till past the deadline and now you're upset that you're getting charged more, for something, and now you can't afford it. I mean, you shouldn't have waited till the deadline. It's like stuff like that. So, I think more information, just talking to people on a personal level, and showing that you can be empowered without being a victim.
Do you think more examples? I mean, we talk about mentoring all the time and the sore lack of it for women in certain fields. And I certainly, I would have loved a female mentor coming up. I didn't have one. But do you think that's part of it, is just we don't have examples of women who went through really terrible stuff and went, well, that sucks, and I'm going to feel bad about it for a while, and then I'm going to get back up and I'm going to try again and I'm going to do better next time?
Yeah, I think that's a problem. I mean, so many women, that become successful don't want to sit there and say all these bad things happen to me. They don't want to be a victim because they're successful. Why do you want to like put that out there?
Yeah.
I mean, I had great mentors and they've been men, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I
No.
mean,
No.
yeah, it'd be cool to see a woman to look up to. I do have women who are in my field that I do look up to, and they're not direct mentors of me. But someone like Christina Hoff Sommers, who I really look up to and is very supportive of me, and she has helped me a lot of times. With various, putting people in contact with me because she believes in me.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she's been very helpful that way. So I do have that, but she's not a direct, sitting by my side, we're in the same workplace kind of mentor.
Hmm.
So I think just for women finding someone to be a mentor and to not necessarily think it has to be another woman, because men can be great mentors as well. All the male mentors that I have had have also been really open and accepting of, whenever I've been upset about something. You
Oh,
would
that's
think that,
great.
right, you
That's
would
really
think that a
good.
man would be like, oh God, she's crying, like get away. No, they've actually sat and listened to me. So you can have a great mentor that's not a woman. So, I mean, yeah, it would be nice just because they can understand things that a man can't. But at the same time, you can find a great mentor in anybody.
Sure, sure. Yeah. No, for me, it's just more like, how do you balance work and children? That's something
Yes,
I don't have
obviously.
kids, not by choice, because I don't have work-life balance. And that's something that I think that, women who successfully manage to juggle career and family, I wish I had that information. I wish I had access to that. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to make the absolute best with what I do have.
Mhm.
Um, just final thing I wanted to talk about, and this is going to seem out of nowhere, but I just want to compliment you very much on that Atticus Fitch satire article you wrote. It really reminded me that we have forgotten, and I mean, this came up in the whole Cosby scandal, the history of black men being falsely accused of rape because of class divides. I think a lot of people have forgotten how significant that phenomenon was. So, what possessed you to write that? Because, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people didn't get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I did get some attacks, just some criticism, which when I say I get some criticism, for me, that's only like a couple tweets. I really don't get the attacks and the harassment that
Oh,
other people
a couple tweets?
get. Yeah,
I wouldn't even care about that. Like, that's
I know. I
clean.
really don't get anything. I mean, that's why when people like try to say like congratulate me or anything, I'm just like, I'm seriously nobody. I don't even get attacked. So I'm clearly not on anybody's radar. But the article came about because Glenn Reynolds, who's Instapundit on Twitter, who cares very much about campus sexual assault, he is also another mentor of mine. He's also been very helpful for me and my articles and making sure that people know who I am and read my stuff. Campus sexual assault is an issue near and dear to his heart. And he had tweeted out something about Atticus Finch being, a rape apologist. And I saw that tweet and thought, you know what? Let me go back and read that chapter. And
You were spot on. You were
yeah, and I
spot
was
on.
reading. It turns out somebody actually wrote something similar like years ago,
Mhm.
and I don't think they were joking. I think they were like serious. But yeah, I just was reading that chapter and I'm like, nope. These days you're not allowed to question the accuser. Nope, nope. Everything he did was absolutely wrong by today's standards. And it's like there's a reason lawyers question is
Yeah.
because there's liars. And if you're not allowed to question, then we live in a society where mere accusation can ruin a person's life, which is what's already happening, but it's becoming acceptable. And
Yeah, I mean,
I think like our system of, due process and everything just crumbles if you can accuse anybody you don't like of anything and you have to take your word for it because you're accused and now you're automatically a victim.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think part of it is that because we get it on the journalist side too, is it's becoming more and more difficult to do quote unquote real journalism because you can't even ask the question, you
Mhm.
know. So I mean, I thought that was very well written piece. I'll put a link to it in the comments because I think it is an excellent bit of satire and um, really shows how much things have changed in our society in a relatively short time. And to get that back around to gaming, I think that might be, and I'm curious your thoughts of it, why gaming is this battleground for so many social issues because it is an industry of innovation and it's an industry of risk. So obviously people are going to try things um, and everybody's going to have an opinion on it and everybody's going to feel I don't want to use the word entitled because people will take that wrong way, but empowered to voice that opinion directly to the person on Twitter. Do you think I've got something here, or am I just way off?
No, I think you do. And I think a lot of it for gaming is because it's such an interactive art form,
Hmm.
whereas somebody makes a movie, even an indie movie, they make it to an audience, yes, but they're making it to that audience, not, for that audience to participate in with them. So you might have games that certain people like, but these people are actually becoming involved in
Hmm.
these games. I know Oliver Campbell had a really great Twitter rant about this like a month or so ago that was just, you know, you're actively participating in a game, right? So, as you do that, you're making it for an audience, but you're actually kind of becoming something because you're becoming part of something. And I think that's kind of why gaming has become such a microcosm of society because it is so expansive. You've got the high school football players are playing Madden. You've got, your mom is playing Candy Crush, or my mom plays Animal Crossing, and my dad plays he likes the Spyro games, but he loves all the Lego, Lego Star Wars, Lego everything. My dad loves those. So you've got your parents playing, which my parents were always gamers, but everybody's parents are now playing something. You've got congressmen who are sitting on the subway playing, Angry Birds or something. Like just everybody plays games now, and everybody has something in it for them that they can actually participate in. So, uh, I don't know. I don't know if that really answered your question, but
I think it did. It definitely. I mean that's what blows cultivation theory out of the water. We're using these media tools, these linear media tools to measure games, and they don't apply because of that control of outcome
Mhm.
element. That cultivation theory works because people can see these horrible things happening to people on television. They're powerless to stop it. When you can run in there with like a battle axe and go, whoosh, bad thing over, you don't get the cultivated effect because it's different for everybody. Everybody has a different experience in a game as opposed to film or television where everyone's seeing the exact same thing. It's almost the difference between multicasting and interactivity and broadcasting. It's more like a play. Every night in a play is a slightly different experience, and I think that's an excellent point that the interactivity changes things radically, and people, I think we haven't truly understood what that means and what that does to the way people respond to medium. So absolutely good point.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess that kind of gets into when you talk about branding gamers all in one
Hmm.
way, when now we know that's just not true. As I said, your parents are playing games. The, high school jocks that used to be portrayed as the ones making fun of the basement dwelling,
Right.
nerdy, quiet kid playing games. And that's not the case, because even if there is a basement dwelling, nerdy, quiet kid, he's online playing games with a whole community now, and everybody's connected. And I mean, that was one of the other things that bothered me about this narrative with Gamergate, that they were just horrible people, when, I mean, Gamergate, or not Gamergate, but gamers care first and foremost about whether you play video games. I mean,
Hmm.
that was this whole idea that they are unfriendly to women and people of color and, people LGBT, when it's like, they really, really are accepting. I mean, the first thing is say, hey, I'm gay. All right, what games do you like? I mean,
Yeah.
that's just how it is. So, I mean, the narrative is just, it still bothers me. It's always bothered me.
Yeah. We've been talking with Ashe Schow, columnist for the Washington Examiner, and clearly gamer. Hope you've enjoyed the discussion. Ashe, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, this is fun.
Oh, good. Fun is important. Games should be fun.
Definitely.